Hello, everyone. I was going to say good morning. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's definitely not morning.
It's been a long day.
That's true.
It's been a long day today.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of one of the worst calamities ever to hit the state of California. As we're doing this podcast, fires are raging in Malibu and other places here, so our hearts go out to all those affected by these fires. And if anybody can help, please, there are several charities that are raising money for this. Chabad of the Palisades, Chabad of Malibu, and Chabad of Pasadena. These are the three Chabad charities that are raising money to help, support their communities, to give food, to give clothing, whatever they need. So please, if you can help in any way to those three charities, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Have any of the Chabad houses been destroyed?
There was one, Chabad of Palisades lost, I think, a shed. It wasn't the actual full structure, but they had a shed with there were storage things that went down the first day. But
I think the shul was fine.
The shul was fine.
That's and then they took out all the Torahs right away, and everyone always
Pasadena, a conservative temple burned down.
A
Pasadena.
Jewish.
Oh, really?
Pasadena Jewish Center. Burned down.
You know what? Actually, I saw. Peter Savodnik from the Free Press.
Yeah.
He said his temple burnt down.
Oh, really?
I think he's in Pasadena, so I wonder if that's the.
That must be it.
I wonder if that's the one.
No.
Yeah.
Then in Pacific Palisades, the Reconstructionist temple KI survived, but they have three rabbis. They all lost their homes. All their homes
gosh
were gone.
All those places are very Jewish. I mean, the Palisades is a big Jewish community, and
but Altadena,
I don't know. Well, Pasadena has
Pasadena, yes.
Right?
Altadena,
but somebody mentioned on another podcast. Who was it? Was it Matt Welch? Maybe that Pacific Palisades was a refuge for Jews escaping the Holocaust. And they were a city that was established, or the pogroms, maybe even before the Holocaust. But the town itself was created to be a refuge for other minority groups. And then when the Jews needed a place to go, many Jews actually moved to Pacific Palisades and were welcomed there by the community.
Really?
As a place. Yeah.
Pacific Palisades?
Yeah. That's what he said. I mean, then it turned into, a very...
That's extremely high end.
Yeah.
Extremely.
How do you say...
Tony,
like
a Tony
neighborhood. I mean, it's a very fancy, very, very fancy place.
I mean, you're talking about Spielberg and crew.
Yeah.
Is that who lives there?
Yeah. I mean, this is you've got the top notch. There's Malibu and maybe one notch down is Pacific Palisades.
Not even. It's just next to it. Yeah. I've been to a house there a few times for different events.
Well, la-ti-da, look at you.
I know. Reason Magazine hosts events up there at a house.
Name dropper.
And no, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Where was it?
Oh my gosh. I can't tell a story about when I was in Pacific Palisades.
You could tell the story. I mean, the Reason Magazine.
But why would I be there?
Who was there at the party?
I'll give you a list.
What were they wearing? Please tell us who was at the party.
Oh my God.
And what. No, don't tell us what they were wearing. Who were they wearing?
Yeah. Well, I was wearing Marshalls. I don't know what everyone else was wearing, but
Marshalls. Wow, Marshalls. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Is he still alive? Marshall? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no, but it's just beautiful. And the canyon, the house overlooks the canyons, and it's one of the most spectacular places. And you can see the ocean, So I wish, gorgeous, I feel for everyone. Place. I feel for everyone. Maybe we'll do an episode one day on
rich people losing their homes?
No, on natural disasters and faith. And I don't know, there's probably a lot of questions there about nature and why, does God, I would like to, not for today, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'd love to kind of unpack if Hashem uses nature as a tool or if it's independent of God. I don't know, just a conversation that we could maybe dive into.
I feel like there was some story about some Egyptians that had some natural disasters used against them.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing independent of God.
Yeah. Are we supposed to take every natural disaster as a message from God? Or is it just random?
No, it's a message from God.
It is?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Every disaster.
Okay.
So on the topic today.
Talking about disasters.
This is a perfect segue into ChayaLeah texted me and said, we're going to talk about the big D on the show today. And I said, delis. I can contribute to that conversation finally. And then to my chagrin, that was not what she was talking about. So, oh well.
No. I got asked this by a few people who asked if we would talk about divorce in Judaism, and sort of just go like we've been doing the last few episodes, which is to look at biblical sources of what the Torah says about divorce, and then maybe something about the rabbis, and then apply it to life today and, the situation that people find themselves in. I do want to just say that I recognize that this is a hard conversation, and every marriage is its own universe, and like the things that we're going to say here today don't apply to everyone across the board, obviously. And if someone is struggling in their marriage or having personal issues, like they should reach out to their personal rabbi or to my father, and they could help you navigate what you need to do or how you should handle it, because I don't think that there's a nice way of just saying like everything for everyone is the same. It's not. I think it's very much a case by case basis. So I don't want to, is that okay?
No, of course, because it's a very individual thing. We're only talking about the idea of divorce.
Exactly.
We're not talking about if you should get divorced.
Right.
So that's not what this is not what the topic is about.
I thought I was going to read names to you, and you would be like, I'd be like,
they should get divorced. I know who you're thinking about. I know who you're thinking about. They should get divorced.
That would do some ratings.
I know.
Yes.
that we get some clicks for that.
We would.
Anybody in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I don't know, Jay, do you want to start, or how do you want to?
Why don't you start? It's your topic, so you can start.
Okay.
And I can jump in with some questions.
Okay. So we did an episode on marriage. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. It was kind of in the beginning of when we started the podcast. And so obviously there's a time and place for divorce. And I want to understand better what the Torah says and how it developed into the way we deal with it today. And there's some controversial parts to it, and I'm going to push you on them a little bit and ask you about it.
Sure.
But let's just dive in.
Okay. All right. So when we talked about marriage, we established one thing very clearly, that there's no more important institution in Judaism than the family. I mean, we start off at the beginning when God created Adam, clearly says in the Torah that it's not good for man to be alone. I'm going to create for him a partner. And therefore, and eventually when it comes time, a man must leave his father and his mother and cling on to the woman, and they become one family unit. And this has remained always foremost in Judaism, that a family and marriage and togetherness and a unity is a priority, number one. So that's why traditionally we got married young, tried to have big families, because this is what the Torah demanded of us. And it's never good for a person to be alone. Then the Talmud goes through many different scenarios where there were even great rabbis who never married because Chashka B'Torah, they loved Torah so very much and they couldn't see themselves getting married with all of the pressures. They were, on one hand, they were praised for their study of Torah, but they were also condemned for not doing what we're supposed to do, and that's get married and have children. Okay, so we understand, and we put down first, the first principle is that marriage is sacrosanct, it's important. But the Torah also realizes that we are human beings, and that number one, people change over time. And for whatever reason, that relationship that you may have had with your wife when you were in the 20s is not the same when you are in the 40s or in the 50s. And there could come certain circumstances where this relationship cannot no more be any more a unit together. So the Torah allows for divorce. And I'm going to quote from the Torah itself, from the Bible itself. And if you go to the back to Deuteronomy, and it says, if a man marries a woman and lives with her, and it will be that she will not find favor in his eyes, and we'll get to that, what that means a little while. For he found in her a matter of immorality. The Torah says, like if she's promiscuous or whatever the circumstances are. And he wrote her a bill of divorce and presented it into her hand and sent it from his house. And she shall leave his house and go marry another man. So the Torah says that if the divorced woman marries someone else, you could never take her back. That's basically what it is. But from here we learn something important, that a man may divorce his wife. that divorce is not prohibited in Judaism. Now, in the verses that we read itself, there are a number of different situations. Like, for example, it says that he found in her a matter of immorality. So you may ask the question, number one, is it only in the cases of immorality? What if she's what if they just don't get along with each other? I mean, they're just two people, and they don't love each other anymore, and whatever the circumstances are, can he divorce her without finding in her any questions of immorality? So, like everything else, I just want to preface before we go into this what the Talmud says in the book of in the tractate of Sanhedrin, that when a man divorces a woman, God cries tears. Tears come from heaven.
Right.
That's how bad it is, and
how painful
it is to him that people are getting divorced. Now, that does not qualify it. It doesn't say, oh, if a man just divorces a woman for no reason, like a no contest divorce, and he just walks out on it. That doesn't say that. It says when a man divorces a woman, tears are shed from heaven. So we see how bad divorce is, and how for centuries and centuries we've always tried to keep the family together. That has always been the number one priority, whatever we do. But again, realizing the circumstances on the ground, that there are certain times when a man and a woman can be together. So the Mishnah, which we've talked about in a number of different ways, writes like this. This is the tractate that deals specifically with divorce. Now, in this podcast, I'd like to stay as much as we can away from the technicality of the divorce.
Right.
Now, you may ask me some questions about what is a get and how is it done and etc. But there's so many different particulars to it. I'd like to just skim over it and talk just about the concept of divorce, on it. But again, if you have any questions about the technicality of it, what it means, because if you heard me say from the Torah, he has to write her a bill of divorce,
right?
Which is called in the Aramaic term a get. So a get is a divorce. And we'll get a little bit into what a get is, but generally, let's just stick to the topic of things. So the Mishnah says like this: Beis Shammai says, this is one opinion. Lo yigarish adam es ishtoi, a man should never divorce his wife, ela im kein matza ba davar erva, unless he finds in her an immorality, that she's promiscuous. And he asks her, please don't be promiscuous, and she doesn't care, and he goes out there and finished. She does what she wants. There comes a point in time when Beis Shammai says, you know what? I'm going to divorce you. He takes the most stringent position because in his life, Beis Shammai lived a very conservative life. And to him, if you made a commitment to somebody, you stick with that commitment. Too bad, at the circumstance, it doesn't matter. Hashkacha pratis, divine providence, put the two of you together, you stick it out. That has been primarily the way people have lived for centuries. You stick it out. He understands also that the Torah, which I quoted from before, clearly states that if you find an issue of immorality, you may divorce her. So that's the only way he'll allow a divorce.
Okay.
So if he's the rabbi in your town, or not him, if he's a student of his or someone that follows his direction, the chances of you getting a divorce are slim.
Right.
Unless you can prove to me that your wife is doing something immoral, forget about it. Go home and make it work. Go home and go home.
Yeah.
Go home. So
so he was strict.
He was very strict. Okay. And he quotes the verse.
Right.
Shenemer, as it says in the Torah, ki matza ba devas lover. He found in her an immorality. Beis Hillel says, listen, the Torah is only referring to a specific case, but that's not all the cases. It's giving a generality. Beis Hillel says, afilu hikdicha tavshilai. Even if she burns his dinner. She burns his dinner. Okay. He was very liberal. Okay, Beis Hillel. He stretched the boundaries and said, hey, you know what? She comes home and she now. Okay. So here we have to unpack something. Why is she burning his dinner? Is she burning his dinner on purpose? That means when he comes home, she serves him a burnt dinner, and he goes, again, you're burning the dinner. Then obviously she's undermining the relationship. What happens if she just by mistake burned the dinner? Right. But here in the Mishnah, it doesn't qualify it. It just says, even if she burnt his dinner, you may divorce her.
divorced.
Okay. Shenemar, as it says, because he quotes also a verse, if you find something immoral, and this is immoral to him, this is an immorality. She's burning his food. Rabbi Kiva, who's the most liberal of all, even if you found someone that's more pleasing to you than she is.
Wow.
Okay? You find someone that's nicer than her, prettier than her, more compatible than her. Shenemar, and he quotes again from the same verses, and if she doesn't find any favor in his eyes. So here you have three different opinions over here. You have number one, the conservative, that said, you know what? You made a commitment. You put a ring on her finger. You brought her into your home. You have children. You're sticking to that commitment. The only way you're out of that commitment is if you find something immoral with her, which, what are the chances? Very few divorces are that way. Beis Hillel extends it. He says, he reads the same verses, and he says, no. Here's a woman that's undermining the relationship. Okay? Right. She's burning. Let's just take the case where she's actually burning his food for on purpose. He shouldn't be able to get out of this marriage. I mean, what kind of a life are they leading?
Right.
And Rabbi Kiva takes it even one step even further, where he says, you know what? Look, human beings are human beings. Things change. When you're 23, you're not the same at 43 or 53 or 63 or 83. You find someone that's better. You have a right to be happy in your life. Sure, you're not happy. So if you find someone better. Now, understand Rabbi Kiva is talking about a situation where this finding someone really undermines the whole marriage.
Right.
I mean, he's obviously not happy, with the marriage, and he comes to the rabbi and he wants, the rabbi to give him a divorce, and the rabbi says, well, why should we do that? And Rabbi Kiva says, because, he says, I found someone more compatible to me. Well, your first instance is going to be, as a rabbi would say, okay, try to work it out. There were things in her, in your wife that you found agreeable, and you loved her at one point. You married her, and if it doesn't work out, okay, you know what? We'll give you. So this is the ultimate in what we would call today in America no contest divorce. Right. You come into court. No one's. There's no reason. It's just that we're not compatible. We want out. We want out now.
Right.
From the Torah's point of view, before you ask this question, from the Torah's point of view, you see how this is moving.
Right.
It's all in the hands of the man.
That's what I was
meaning that the man said, the man wants, the man is, the man. Blah, blah, blah. Now, to be honest with you, and we're not going to pull any punches. If you do any research, you'll know that biblically, a man married a woman, he could just throw her out of his house. Goodbye. I don't want you. It's nothing. Remember, marriage, when we talked about it, was sort of somewhat a business transaction, where you were actually acquiring her and her property, and of course you love her, and she's a kersabaya, she makes the home, yes, but in the technical terms, you are actually giving her money, you're giving her a ring, and you're bringing her into your home. Right. So this acquisition is now being cut. I mean, I'm cutting my losses. And I'm pushing you out, and that would be any reason. If we go according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm pushing you out, and you had no recourse.
You didn't have anything to stop it.
There's no recourse.
Okay.
First of all, polygamy was allowed.
Right.
So if I wanted to take another wife and get rid of you, no problem. Or I could take another wife with you.
Right.
That was not a problem. But I can kick you out. Okay. The rabbis said and understood that the Torah is given in a perfect world, meaning that when the Torah looked at human beings, it expected men to act morally and decently.
Right.
It didn't give the Torah to degenerates, someone that's changing, like a wife every month, wife of the month. It gave it to people that were serious, cared about God, understood that the Talmud says that if you divorce your wife, you're a bad person. Because God, you're causing anguish to God, so you're going to take this seriously. So that's why even Rabbi Akiva could be so flippant. I mean, say, even if you find someone better than her, nicer than her, prettier than her, because he understood that we're dealing with serious people. We're dealing with a person that really thought this through, cared about this, worked this through. Okay, now if there's such a if we lived in that kind of a world where, you know what, the husband loves the wife, wants to take care of her and all of that stuff, and it starts great, we'd have no problem. Everybody would be getting along. I take care of my wife. She doesn't have to go to work. I bring in the income. My wife raises the children. We're living this beautiful, happy, blissful life. Everything is great. No one have a problem with that. Why would anybody have a problem with that? No one have a problem with that. But then, of course, everything falls apart. We reject God. We reject the values of the Torah. We start looking at other people, living like other people. We inherit foreign cultures and we integrate them into our society. Then, of course, it looks like holy maloney. Now we go back to the Torah and we use it kind of a lever.
Right.
I'm in charge. You are such a bum. You know what? The Torah demands of you to be a faithful person, and now you're using that which the Torah demanded of you by being a good guy. You're using it now as a no goodnik.
Right.
Okay. So the rabbis realized that you know what, the situation 1,000 or 2,000 years after the Torah was given is we're not living in the same kind of a society that where the Torah would wanted ideally. So they said we're going to put. No, we can't eradicate the words of the Torah. The words of the Torah is if the husband divorces the wife. But what we're going to do is we're going to put in safeguards.
Right.
We'll put safeguards to make sure that if you're going to go through with this, you're going to pay a price. So number one, we instituted a ketubah, meaning, okay, you want to get rid of her, you're going to pay. Mm-hmm. You will pay. And not only are you going to pay, but you're going to pay a lot.
Right.
Okay. You're going to pay her for this. And they made 10 stipulations, meaning that you have to take care of her. You have to feed her. You have to clothe her. You have to pay for her burial. You have to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Even for your ex-wife, you're saying.
Even for your ex-wife. 10 stipulations that the rabbis instituted. You're going to get rid of her. It's going to cost you.
Right.
It will cost you. So think twice. Think twice about doing this. Then came a little bit later on, if you remember, we talked about that. I don't know if we ever mentioned this, but during the 11th century, there was a convention of rabbis in Europe. Rabbeinu Gershon was the head of this convention and had instituted certain restrictions. Polygamy was out.
They banned it.
Banned polygamy. Monogamy was in, and no woman would be able to be divorced against her will.
Right.
You can't divorce a woman against her will. If she's willing, okay, sit down and we'll do it. But nobody has a right to throw someone else out against her will. So those were some of the protections that the women got from the rabbis. It's not a perfect situation.
Well, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. But that was kind of the history of the idea of divorce as it came through. Regardless, it always was and it will always be the rabbi's first choice is not to divorce, not to get divorced, to always keep that holy and trying to keep that union together. Understanding quite well that sometimes a divorce is going to be necessary.
Right.
In America, we'll get to in a moment, but that's kind of biblically, and then with the rabbinical safeguards to it.
Interesting.
So,
okay, go ahead.
So, is there biblically, is there a difference if the couple has children or not?
No.
Okay.
No. It all that matters in a divorce is that once a woman is divorced, she must wait at least minimum of 3 months before she remarries.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we're afraid that she's pregnant.
Right.
And if she's pregnant, well, we don't know. Okay, next thing you know, like now she's pregnant. Who's the father? So she needs to wait 3 months before she gets divorced. Now, on the flip side, I was talking about right now how the husband, is in charge. There are times when a woman is allowed to divorce a husband.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes, there are times in the Talmud which says clearly, in the Torah, that she comes to the court and she will petition the court that her husband needs to divorce her. Number one, if he withholds from her anything that he's biblically obligated to do for her.
Right.
Giving her food, giving her clothing, intimacy, all of these things.
Right.
If he refuses, he has to divorce her.
Right.
He has to divorce her. Even to the point where it goes to the extreme, he has bad breath. I can't take it. I can't take it. I can't take it, and doesn't want to do anything about it. So the Talmud says,
Really?
this is
Wow.
this is one of the things that the husband or his job, his occupation. He's a garbage man. I don't want it.
Really?
I don't want it. I don't
Really?
want it. He's a garbage man. It's filthy. It stinks.
Wow.
It's not sanitation engineers like we have
I
today.
know sanitation engineers.
Today it's
yes.
a sanitation engineer.
Yeah.
In those days, it was like a garbage person.
Right.
I don't want it.
I can only imagine what the trashmen in ancient Sumeria must have.
Oh my
smelled like.
So there's a list. There's a list of conditions that the woman says, I don't want to live like this. I'm not interested.
So she goes to the
petitions.
rabbis.
The rabbis say to the guy, listen, your wife has a very good argument. Change your job. He refuses. Okay, if you refuse, divorce her. She has a right to be divorced. You cannot compel her to live with you under these circumstances. And there's a list of conditions that happen.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, no, I'm just going to finish because this is an interesting thought.
Okay.
What if the guy refuses?
Right.
The guy refuses. I'm not doing it. Okay. So here's where it comes the difference, like Jay had asked before, biblically or post-biblically. So in America, this cannot be done. Mm-hmm. But in Israel, this can be done. And I will quote from Maimonides what he says. Now, when regard this person who refuses to divorce his wife, it is only in his evil inclination that presses him. That means, from Maimonides, if the Torah says to you that a woman has a right to have this, and you have to divorce her, and you decline, it's only because your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, is stopping you. Therefore, when he is beaten, until his evil inclination has been weakened and he consents, it's considered to have performed the divorce willfully.
Wow.
Meaning that hit him and beat him until he says, I'm willing to do that. Because you have to have consent. Yeah. But beat him until he says it. So then the rabbis all ask, but he didn't give consent. It wasn't willingly. So Maimonides says it is willingly, because his real will is to do the right thing. His evil inclination now has overpowered him. So that's what's stopping him from giving a divorce. So our job is to weaken the Yetzer Hara, to weaken the evil inclination. Wow. How do you weaken the evil inclination? A couple of ways. First, you say please. You act nice to him. Do the right thing. And if he doesn't listen to you, get a whip and beat him until he says right, sonny. Wow. Till he says I am. And rabbis for centuries have been quoting this to show you that, what is the true intention of the Jew is right, sonny. I want to do the right thing. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm beholden to the evil inclination. Don't worry. We have a solution. Right. Interestingly enough, parenthetically, this was an episode on The Sopranos.
Yes.
This was an episode on The Sopranos.
That's right.
Where a guy came to Tony, and he said, please, my son-in-law, doesn't want to give a divorce and they take him and they beat him up. Well, this was based on a true case in America where they were doing this. Unfortunately, the FBI got involved as a sting operation, and they found the rabbis and arrested the rabbis, because in America, it seems that it's illegal to beat someone up. I don't know why.
These were Jews doing this?
Yes. And not in The Sopranos, it was Tony and his gang. Right. But here, the real case was a group of rabbis, took the son-in-law, and they had plans to really, beat him up. Somehow it got to the FBI. They planted a sting, whatever, and they arrested the rabbis.
But actually, it's not theoretical, because I have a friend, and I'm not going to say who, obviously, right now, but I have a friend.
Right now? You're not going to say your friend.
I'm not going to say who. Whose in-laws, the father-in-law ran away because he didn't want to give his wife a divorce, and his wife waited many, many years for a divorce from him. And it was only at my friend's wedding when the father finally came to town for his son's wedding, and his son and their friends organized, they beat him up. They beat up the father until he agreed to give the mother a divorce.
This is where, in America?
Yeah, it happened in New York. Uh-huh. And I mean, no one knew about it. It wasn't in the news or anything. It was all done kind of hush hush, but we knew about it. I mean, they literally planned to beat this guy up so that they can get a divorce for the mother. And so it's not just theoretical. It doesn't happen a lot
because in America it's illegal to do that.
Yeah. But it's an interesting thing that does happen sometimes.
That's
I know
that's wild.
It is wild.
So did you say this happened in Israel?
Yes, it does. It does. Are you getting a phone call right now?
Yeah, I know how to. Yes, I'm sorry. I have to call back.
What are you doing? Oh, who is it?
Is it our musical interlude?
Yeah, exactly. Did you hang up?
I hope so.
Maybe someone's so upset about the story that they're calling. No, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's fascinating.
Yeah,
if we're going to get into the modern application of divorce,
let's stick now just to biblical, post-biblical, concept of divorce, and then we'll get into America.
I have a question that is kind of tangentially related.
Sure.
Did Moses divorce his wife after the giving of the Torah?
Okay, so Moses separated himself from his wife.
Okay.
He definitely separated himself from his wife. It doesn't say this clearly in the Torah, but we understand this from the oral tradition that he did that. The reason he did that was a technical one, had nothing to do with his love for Zipporah.
Okay.
He loved her, he cared for her. Because he was in constant contact with God, and he had to be in a state of purity. Remember, in those days, purity and impurity played a very important part in the Torah. You could not come to the temple, you could not come to the sanctuary if you were impure.
Right.
Part of being impure was after you were intimate. You had to go to the mikveh, you had to do this, you had to do that. Moses felt because he was never sure when God will approach him. I mean, this is the only man in history that this happens to.
I understand that.
Don't get me wrong. This is not, everyone says, well, I don't know when God is going to appear to me. But because God had this constant relationship with him, he thought, you know what, look, he's prophesizing. I mean, when God says, I want you to speak, means God wants him to prophesize.
Right.
I have to be in a state of purity. So that's why he technically he left her and not willingly.
Right. I was just trying to think if there's an example of a divorce in the Torah, and that was the one that I thought of.
Exactly. I was going to ask actually is if there are examples in the Torah of anybody important.
I don't know.
You don't see in the Bible. You don't see that.
But marriage, I feel like, was so different in the Torah to begin with. I mean, in ancient times in general. I mean, it wasn't a romance novel where it's like you thought, this is the love of my life and we're going to spend, 60 years together. I mean, people got married for practical reasons, right? They made alliances. It was tribal. They needed women. I'm not saying nobody was in love with each other. Right. I'm not saying there wasn't a love component, but it was different.
There was also a lot of polygamy too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Jacob saw Rachel, he loved her.
Yeah.
He fell in love with
love.
her. There was love. And I think, Isaac and Rebecca, that was love.
Right.
And no question.
The Torah is modeling that love should exist in a marriage.
Yeah, absolutely love. But again, it's an attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything else, it's a mindset that if I make a commitment, this is what I'm going to do. Now, the Torah tells us that couples, after 10 years of marriage, and are childless, should divorce.
Right.
I mean, because you don't know because there's a great mitzvah of there's a big mitzvah of being fruitful, and since the two of you are obviously not going to do that, divorce, maybe it's her fault, maybe it's his fault. We don't know. So maybe, but the two of you are not going to be able to do that. Okay, that becomes sort of. I think that fell out. I mean, I know, like, for example, the Rebbe didn't have children, didn't divorce his wife after 10 years. But there are people that do that. There are people still today that feel that, if we're not going to have any children, and I do want children, polygamy is outlawed, and so you do that. It's a sad thing because they love each other. It's not because there's no harmony. They're harmonious, but because of a technicality, they have to get divorced. I mean, there's a little famous story with the Rebbe, and there was a guy. He came to the Rebbe. He didn't have any children, and then all of a sudden he divorced his wife because he wanted to have children. And after he divorces her, he finds out she's pregnant.
Oh no.
Okay. Now, for most people, it's not a problem. So you just remarry her.
Right.
The problem is he was a Kohen.
Oh.
A Kohen can't marry a divorced woman. And she was divorced by him.
No.
So he couldn't remarry her. He loved her, and she's pregnant now.
Oh no!
So he went around the entire world to rabbis and rabbis and rabbis and rabbis, and no one can find a loophole for him. I mean, he was a Cohen. They were divorced. The get was good. Everything was good. He can't marry her. He had a friend to said to him, "Why don't you go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe?" Go to Lubavitcher. He was go Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'm not a Chabadnik. Right. I have no connection to Hasidim. I grew up in a whole different. He said, "Look, what do you have to lose?
Right.
What do you got to lose?" Okay, he figures. Okay, how do you get to the Rebbe? So the last 6 years when the Rebbe was functioning, he used to do what they call dollars. Right. Every Sunday, he would give out $1 to someone, and then you can approach him.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
So the friend said, "Go there, approach the Rebbe, and then tell him the story and see what the Rebbe says. I'll wait here." Okay, the young man goes up there, tells the Rebbe the story. The Rebbe tells him, "Go speak to your mother. Here's $1 for your mother." Guy walks out. His friend asks him, "So what did the Rebbe say?" He thought the Rebbe was going to come with a brilliant solution, a loophole. He says, I saw a response in 1747, the same case, and they allowed it. The guy said, "Go talk to their mother." So he went like this. So the guy says, "Why are you doing this? Why are you shrugging it off? If the Rebbe said, go talk to your mother, go talk to your mother. She'll have a solution." So what was my mother going to have a solution? What was my mother a rabbi? What she's going to have a solution? If the Rebbe said, go talk to your mother, go talk to your mother. Okay, he said, "Ma, I went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said I should talk to you." She broke down in tears. He was adopted.
Oh, he wasn't
He was adopted.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? The man was adopted.
Oh my God.
Okay? He was adopted. Wow. He was not a Cohen.
Right.
Once he's not a Cohen, no problem. Remarry her.
Wow.
Okay? Oof. Here's a man sitting in Brooklyn, New York. Don't ask me how, what, when. Don't ask me any questions about this. This is a story that we heard directly from the Rebbe's secretary who was there at the time.
So let me ask you this. If a woman and a man get divorced.
Correct.
And then they want to remarry again, they can get remarried. Now, what happens if they had relationships in between? Does that negate their...
So it depends. Okay. It depends. If the man is a Kohanim have different standards.
Right.
If she had a relationship with someone else, he can't remarry her because she falls into this category of an immoral one. With the husband himself, if she didn't marry somebody, meaning she just had a relationship, but she didn't marry him, whatever that means, he can remarry. He can remarry her.
Oh, interesting.
He could remarry her. But you'd have to be very careful because if they were, for example, if they were intimate together, that brings up a lot of different issues. It's not really a marriage, the intimacy, but it's a form of marriage. Something, you know. So you'd have to go to a rabbi and he'd have to listen to the case. But if you just had a regular relationship, a platonic relationship with someone, you could remarry. You can definitely remarry.
One thing I wanted to say also too, just coming back to discussion of love in marriage is, it's and we've talked about this before on the podcast about putting things in context of the world that existed at the time. Yeah. And when during biblical times there was no Tinder, people didn't live in 10 million people cities where there was 1 million people to choose from. These people were, and I know there were some big cities like Abraham came from Ur was the city of Ur.
Ur.
So maybe there were some, who knows how big those cities were, but most people didn't live like that. They lived in smaller communities. And so it wasn't like there were 1 million people to choose from. You had, a small number of people to choose from. So either you fell in love or you didn't, but you still wanted to get married and have children. So there was the practical reality of that.
That was absolutely. And that carries forward into when we were living in small communities throughout Eastern Europe, or, even among Sephardim. I mean, it was small communities. A person in the Middle Ages at most in his whole life saw 500 people. I mean, how many people did he encounter? 500? Maybe if he was bold, 1,000 people.
Yeah.
If he went out of his city. But that was it. And the idea was that love will come afterwards. You don't have to fall in love. You marry, you have children, you love her.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you love her? I mean, okay, she's not this, she's not that, she's not. But you didn't know that. She's not Marilyn Monroe, but you didn't know about Marilyn Monroe. No one knew about Marilyn Monroe.
Right,
in those days. So I think my grandparents in Europe, met at the chuppah.
Right.
I mean, if not my grandparents, my great grandparents, the families got together and they said, "Hey, you know what?
This one and
this
one.
and this." And that's the way it is. And the two of them sat there and they had kids and they lived together. And one of them could have been miserable and the other one could have been happy, or both of them could have been miserable. But we didn't have this idea. You have to find yourself. What do you mean find yourself?
Yeah.
You find yourself by going to work. That's how you find yourself, because you sew the shoes or put whatever it is, do whatever. But here in America today, it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, well, when I remember learning, I think I mentioned this before, but I remember being told, the regular people, not us, right? Like regular Americans or whoever,
secular,
secular people marry the person they love. And we love the person we marry.
Very good.
Right. So person, whoever you end up with, you learn how to love them. And there is a tension today. I think that there's such an emphasis on self-actualization and, living your best life and the best you and being happy all the time. And I think that it's a very compelling story to tell ourselves, right? I mean, who doesn't want to feel good and who doesn't want to be happy? And then I think I'm the only girl here, so I'll say it, but add on a layer of, being raised with romantic comedies and reading love stories. And so you get an idea in your head, or you have a perception that every relationship should look a certain way. And the reality is very different than
that's fantasy.
Yeah, but
that's not reality.
But that's the question I have. So what happens today when, so many people are miserable because their life didn't turn out because they're
told to be miserable. I'm telling you, they're told to be miserable. Society places this cloud upon them.
Right.
You're miserable. Why are you miserable? Because why? Because you read a Harlequin romance and you're walking down the street and you saw this 6'3" guy, a bodybuilder, and long blonde hair, who looked like what's his name,
Fabio.
Fabio.
Why are you describing Fabio?
Fabio, and I saw Fabio, and I fell into Fabio. Fabio's a dummy, okay? Yeah. He's a dummy. You can't put a sentence together, okay? But that puts a perception in our mind, and then we think that if we don't have these feelings of overwhelming love for the person, then nothing's nothing.
But what if you truly are incompatible? Let's take intimacy for example. Yes. I mean, that's a big. Intimacy is a huge part of marriage, or
Correct.
should be.
Correct.
And I know a lot of people who feel very incompatible with their partner. I mean, is that a reason?
So first of all, I'm telling you right now, 90% of those people, do you know what the problem is?
What?
Communication. I promise you, a lot of it is communication, that they're not sitting and talking and being honest with each other. Right. Everybody expects the partner to be able to read their minds. So the guy who once heard that you could do it on a chandelier thinks he's going to do it on a chandelier. Oh okay? God. I'm just saying.
I understand.
And he doesn't say, I would like to do it on a chandelier, but he expects to do it on a chandelier. Now what is she supposed to do? Right. Read his mind and climb up on the chandelier? I mean, thinking that
This is the worst example ever.
I'm just saying,
go on.
I'm going to an extreme because an extreme because no one in their right flippant mind would think the guy wants it on a chandelier, right? On a chandelier. Most, I'm not saying all, most of it is communication and expectation.
Right.
Okay. You're expecting when it either comes to intimacy or to love or to cooking or to whatever the circumstances are, or even to making a living. When I met you, I had such high hopes for you, thinking you're going to become a doctor, and you became a guy that works in an office.
Right. Right.
Okay, so you don't communicate with each other. You don't say what's frustrating you, but you expect the other person to read your mind and to rectify it.
Right.
Now, are there some times when there is incompatibility in intimacy? Of course there is. But you try to work it out.
Right.
If you truly love the person, and intimacy is, don't forget, only one part.
Right.
Maybe an important part, right? One important part of the relationship. But if everything else is working for you, does it pay to divorce because of this intimacy issue? Let's work on it. Let's see if we can find a happy medium.
Well, is there a difference? Sorry, Jay, but you can go in a second. But is there a difference if you have kids or not?
Yeah, big difference.
Like if you don't have children and you feel incompatible with a person, or you don't love them, or you meet someone that you fall in love with, and you don't have kids,
it's still sad.
It's sad.
It's still sad,
right?
Yes, but it's not, because you're not hurting anybody but yourself.
Right.
When you have children, you're murdering your kids. You're murdering them. So if you're willing to murder them, when I say murder them, I'm using an exaggeration. I'm being but if you're hurting them, no matter what. And people say, "Oh, you know what? It's going to be a good divorce. We both understand each other." Really? Does the kid laying in bed understand that his father's not around anymore or the mother's not around anymore? But they're okay. They're friends. They're friends. You can't fool kids. So when kids come into play, I would be much, much, much more reticent in allowing you to get a divorce, or advising you to get a divorce.
Right.
Work it out. You made this family. You have a responsibility. Grow up. If the kids are grown, a different story.
Right.
The kids are out of the house, a different story. But once you have children, little children, no. That's at least I think what the Torah expects of you, to be a good human being. And that's why I said in the beginning that the Torah was given to us in a pristine manner, that you're going to do the right thing. We talked about tzedakah last week, about tzedek, to be righteous, to do the right thing. But I think today people are impatient. They want instantaneous gratification, and it doesn't work that way. Life never works that way. I don't care how fast you're going to get the internet to work, or how fast you're going to get something to move around the world. Emotions of humans take time, and things have to percolate, and things have to grow together, and that's how things. And there's going to be hiccups, and there's going to be pitfalls, but that's what being a mature person is all about. Now you could be a baby. And and come crying to the rabbi's office or to the therapist's office, me, like that. But that's not being a giver. That's not being a person.
I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is this idea of instant gratification. And when people, when they get married and you have kids, you have a duty now that beyond your partner. I mean, you still have a duty to them, but your bigger duty is to your kids and your children.
Yeah. So totally.
And I think that there is something lost in our society amongst some people about just sucking it up and like living up to your responsibilities. And it's not all about, finding yourself and optimizing, trying to optimize your happiness every second of the day. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your own happiness is just doing what your duty is and living up to your responsibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. But because we have this romanticized idea of what marriage should be, like ChayaLeah had mentioned before, whether you get it through a book or you get it through a movie or whatever the circumstances, and you allow yourself to let that seep into your own vision of what you look like.
Right.
Think about that for a second. I mean, really? I mean, that's what a human being is all about. It's certainly what Yiddishkeit is not what it's all about. Looking at someone else. One of the 10 commandments is leisachmaid, not to be envious. Not to do that. Now we live in a world where everything is open, and a 5-year-old kid knows more today than a groom did in Poland. About all these issues. So it's the cat is out, or whatever it is. The bird is out of the cage, whatever it is. But still, we live a traditional life, and our values are based upon Torah and its mitzvahs. It's not a fad, where it come and goes and come and goes. We talked about the sanctity of marriage that has gotten us 3,000 years that has worked, for us. And I don't know if people after they're divorced, if then they find the true love of their life, or they're much more they're happier now. I think they'll convince themselves because now they went through this whole angst of getting divorced. But I'm not so sure that that's going to make you happier by getting divorced.
It's like my wife says a lot. No matter where you go, there you are. And it's usually when people are trying to make these changes in their lives, they're looking at all around them and looking at all of the external things that are making them happy, and they don't actually look in the mirror and realize. And this is kind of the point you were making earlier, Rabbi, is no, I'm the one making me unhappy. Yes. The changes have to be the changes I make within myself, and the external things I can pick up and move my stuff from California to North Carolina, or buy a new car, or go on a trip around the world, or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're still you, and you got to fix that before anything else externally is going to make a difference.
Absolutely. It's looking in the mirror and saying to yourself, I have to fix the problem. I got to be the one to make some changes, or some decisions, because we've put the idea of happiness, like we talked about in the Mishnah before, about when can you divorce your wife? And Rabbi Akiva's position was, you find someone better or whatever it is. And I know it's kind of really, that's so easy. We've put this idea of happiness on a pedestal, and we've said, you are here to be happy. You have a right to be happy. And I agree. Happiness is a wonderful, wonderful idea. And, people that are happy live longer, they're healthier, and all this stuff. People that laugh, are happy, happier. But we also, with that, tied it into destination happiness, meaning that if I achieve A, B, and C, then I will allow myself to be happy. If I can just get that cruise around the world, if that would happen to me, then, but until that time, I can't be happy. But if my neighbor owns a Tesla and I own a Honda, I'm not happy. When will I allow myself to be happy? When I could drive when I could pull in with a Tesla. That's what we call, we've trained ourselves destination happiness. When I get somewhere, then I'll allow myself to be happy. And we do it from when we are little children, because when your father buys you that first tricycle, you are so happy with that tricycle until you see a kid with a bicycle. And then you go, what? Well, my father, the cheapo, he buys me a 3-wheeler. I want a 2-wheeler. And from then on, this rat race that we call starts. Now we're on the treadmill. The treadmill, the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel. Now we're on this hamster wheel, because I'm only going to allow myself to be happy when I get. Now the bicycle doesn't work because someone has a scooter. Now I need a scooter. Now a scooter doesn't work because someone has a car.
Have you ever heard of Rene Girard, the philosopher?
Yes.
Yeah, and his concept of mimetic desire, and how all the things you think you want, you don't actually want. You're just mimicking the things around you.
Yes.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
That's what it is.
I think, okay, I just want to say this. I want to say a few things. So first of all,
you can push back.
I mean, obviously what you're saying is right, both of you. And I think, not to plug other podcasts, since this is the only podcast anybody should be listening to, but Ben Shapiro, who doesn't only talk about politics, but sometimes talks about life and whatever, and you don't have to listen to his politics, but he had a really interesting episode, and we could probably link it if we want, about marriage.
That'll be good, because he needs listeners. He needs
listeners. I know
we have to feed him listeners to keep up.
Exactly.
He's got a lot of kids now. He needs the money.
No, but I don't usually listen to him, but I listened to that episode, and I think he said a lot of very interesting things about, basically being committed to the institution of marriage. And he wasn't wasn't saying you shouldn't love your partner, but you have a commitment and loyalty and duty to the family as a unit, right? So even if you are personally unhappy, like you have to push that aside and, live for your family and do what you have to do. And similar to what you guys are saying here.
Right.
But the only thing I would say is, at the end of the day, we're human beings and we have feelings. And it's easy to say, like, push it aside and do what you have to and do, but often it's really difficult for people to do that. I don't want to just minimize how hard it is sometimes for people to pretend through life or to act like you love the person that you're with or to overcome massive challenges that relationships have. And the world today is, I don't care what anyone says. I know every generation thinks that they have the hardest time, but I think we live in a unprecedented time because of the internet and what our world is and the things that are being thrown at us all the time. And I just want to name that, like, it's hard. It's hard work. I mean, it's not simple and not easy. And
that's true.
Sometimes you can't do it.
It's true.
I mean,
it's whatever you said is true. Whatever is true. And there are times when people are not compatible. And especially if one person is mean or, is abusive. It's abusive,
sure,
yes.
Right?
Yeah,
that's why the Torah says, that's why the Torah says that there are times when you have to separate.
Right.
Go your separate ways. So we're not stuck in this in this terrible situation forever. There is an out, but here we've made it too easy, and we've made the out, the negativity, such a low bar. A low bar. You say it's very tough here. It is. We see a lot more stuff. We're exposed to a lot more stuff. But is it as hard as going back 100 years when a guy had to bust his back? The mother didn't have all the facilities, didn't have a washing machine, didn't have a dryer, didn't have a dishwasher, didn't have all these things.
I'll answer that.
Yes.
I think physically, you're absolutely right. It was much harder.
Think about that.
But I think emotionally and mentally, it's much harder today because they also didn't have Instagram where you're watching. But listen, you didn't have Instagram that all you're doing is scrolling and seeing everybody's amazing life.
Think about this for a second.
And so you feel jealous.
Think what you're saying.
Reality.
Think what you're saying. You are literally. You're literally saying that what we're doing here in America today is actually inviting cancer into our lives.
That is correct.
We're injecting cancer. Now, so you can't tell me that this is the hardest thing because we're willingly injecting cancer into our lives. So if you go back 100 years, my great grandfather would be sitting here and he says, "What are you crazy? What are you doing?
Why do you need Instagram?
Why do you need this for? If this is causing you anguish and stress, why do you need? I would be willing to give everything up for indoor plumbing, so I can pish without getting frozen in Poland. Okay, I give everything up. I should have one warm pish. No, so what are you doing? You're bringing Instagram in, you're bringing this in, and then you're using that to say I'm unhappy.
Right.
I mean,
and the other side too.
Do you think anybody's going to envy you? Someone's going to say, "Oh, you guys have it so happy." No,
I'm stating the reality. On the other side of it, you have a lot of men who are addicted to pornography and are watching pornography and think that their wife should be a certain way. I mean, there's all these different.
And so what I say to that guy? I smack him in the head. That's what I do. I smack him in the head, and I say to him, "Stop dreaming. Get out. You're ill. You're ill. You're injecting yourself with cancer. Heal thyself."
Right.
No. The problem is that I'm unhappy. No. The problem is you're making yourself sick. You're making yourself sick.
I don't know if today's day and age is harder. I think it's different.
Yeah.
I think the challenges are different.
It is
because if you go back to go back to ancient Greece, right?
Yeah.
And the men were gone fighting wars all the time.
Yes,
and they were all gay.
At least they were all naked.
But if you were a wife. Right. Your husband basically came home long enough to put a baby in you. Yeah. And then he was going off to fight the next war. And God knows if you ever saw him again.
Right.
right?
Maybe that was better for people.
Well,
maybe we're together too much.
well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but but it was hard. So that would be very difficult because now you're a woman. You've got however many kids you've got a husband who's just off fighting wars.
Yeah.
When he gets back, if he gets back, who knows if he's going to be dismembered or whatever. Right. And it's different. It's hard now, but it's hard in different ways than it's been in the past.
Yeah.
There's always crap to deal with.
We can use a little, resilience. We can use a little resiliency here. Yeah. I mean,
think about the Jews living in palace settlements.
Yeah.
And I mean, from 1 second to another, they were one heart attack of a czar away from having
getting kicked out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the challenges with the modern challenges are different because they're almost not even human challenges. They're technology challenges, which I think is unique to this generation from historically, but there's everyone's got their crap to deal with. It just changes over time.
Yeah. The other thing I think that's difficult, and again, maybe this is from a female perspective, but I think it's important that, because I say this all the time to my students, but this modern idea that your spouse is supposed to be everything to you, right? We're told that, they're supposed to be your best friend and your lover and your sibling and they're supposed to be everything. You're supposed to rely on each other for everything. I think that's ridiculous. And I think in the Orthodox world, we're not really told that. It's like, you're going to have friends. You're going to have your sisters. You're going to have there's going to be a lot of different people to fill all different kinds of needs. And your spouse is one of those people that you are going to have for support. It's not going to be the only person. I think that's a big thing.
But just let me warn you to that.
Yeah.
So let me give you a warning to what you're saying right now, because a lot of people take that and then, like everything else in America, exaggerate it.
Yeah.
So what we've developed is what we call office wives. Okay, you have an office wife, meaning like ChayaLeah said, look, my wife is not everything to me. My wife doesn't understand me. I come from Montreal. She's from New York. I talk a different language. She doesn't understand me. So I have a coworker in my office. She understands me better than my wife. So instead of sitting down with my wife and having real conversations, we'll just shimmy it over and say, hey, you know what? You fit one thing. You're a great mother, or you're a great cook. I said, but my real wife, where I invest my emotional, baggage, is to the wife in the office. No, that doesn't work that way. That's not a marriage, and then you convince yourself, why am I unhappy? Because you allowed yourself to find that. So your wife is actually very, very different than anybody else in the world. Right. Not your children, not your grandparents, not your parents, no one. I mean, I love my kids. Beyond to the world and back. No question about it. Not you, but my other kids. But,
I was like, wow, that's such a nice thing to say.
Beyond. But there's a special place for a spouse with a husband that no one else gets in there. Nobody, not children, not parents, not in-laws, not grandparents. They're a special unit. The relationship is very different than everybody else. Right. And we should never forget
That's
that.
True.
There's nothing wrong with friends.
Yeah.
It's good to have friends. It's good to have an open home. And inviting in guests is one of the great issues here. In Judaism. All true, and you love your kids and you love your parents, but there's a special place that no one is allowed to enter except your spouse. That's a sanctity, a sanctuary that no one gets into, not your office workers and not your best friends, and no one gets in there. When we understand that's sacrosanct, then no problem. But if we don't realize that, we run into issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So much as you love me, Baruch is the number one. You have to remember that. Because when I once asked Goldie, when she had Mati, my grandson, I said, who do you love more, me or Mati? And she, without blinking an eye, Said Mati, what? So I said to her, you know what? Right answer.
That's the right answer.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
You have to love
Yeah,
your
but
kids.
you didn't. What if you asked her, who do you love more, me or Naftali? And then you have to see what she would say.
Oh, no, that I don't.
That's her husband. Don't ask that question. No, I'm just kidding. But
You know, that's
So all right. So I did want to ask Rabbi. I mean, I assume being the pillar of the community that you are, people must come to you asking about these things, asking for advice, and so what do you do when someone comes to you and asks
so
you
I
about?
tell them, first of
good
all,
question.
I am not a professional. I'm not a professional marriage counselor. So don't think I'm gonna, my advantage is I know a little bit about what Judaism says, and I have experience of over 40 years of marriage, and I'm meeting a lot of people, and maybe I'm a little in tuned into what people feel and think. That's my only advantage. And each case is very different. Each case is, like ChayaLeah said in the beginning,
yeah,
every case is unique. Sometimes I tell them I can't help you. You really need marriage counseling. Sometimes it's just a matter of understanding, maybe going through a few steps. One, I have always talked about communications is so critical because even when we communicate, we don't talk to each other. We talk over each other.
Mhm.
We don't listen to each other. We listen, but we don't really hear what the other person is saying. So, I try to get them to at least focus on it. And if there's a specific problem, try to solve that specific problem and go. But every case is different. And ultimately, there's been a lot of cases of couples that from my office that have gotten divorced. And as much as it hurts me, a lot of times I say, they're better off. They're literally
Right.
better off.
right.
He's happier, she's happier. But when there's young kids, I have a very, very difficult time seeing that because that really
Sure.
that just changes the whole dynamics. And I mean,
Yeah.
but if there's serious cases like when people have mental illness that I can diagnose, you got to go to a professional. You don't need a rabbi. You need a psychiatrist
Yeah.
because you're dealing with literally, mental illness.
Right.
And I get him out of the office and eat lunch. That's the key. Get him out.
That reminds me of Anna Karenina, the opening line of Anna Karenina, that happy families are all alike and unhappy families are unhappy in their own unique ways.
There you go.
Only nerds can quote Anna Karenina like that.
I don't think it was an exact. I don't think it was an exact quote. I think it was.
He's a scholar.
That's a summary.
Fine, I'm joking. Only scholars like you can quote.
Oh yes. I'm a scholar. All right, something like that.
Okay, one last quick thing that I just want to say, because I know people are going to want to hear what we say about this. We don't have to spend any time on it, but there is this new idea. Not every rabbi buys into it, and I don't know how my father feels about it, but there is a movement now when people get engaged before they get married, they sign what's called a
prenup,
a halachic prenup, which is a protection for the wife that if God forbid something happens in the marriage and she wants a divorce, but the husband, because we talked about how the husband really has the power of giving the divorce or not. And this is problematic because some men, most of the time it's not an issue, but there are abusive men who sometimes abuse the system and use the get as a tool against their wives. So in such a case, if you have a halachic prenup that says, however you spell it out with the rabbis, and it has to do with actual courts, like the United States court system, you can somehow get around any of those issues. And so a lot of young couples are actually choosing to sign these halachic prenups. Not all communities, certainly not in the Haredi community. I think we still have a long way to go towards figuring that piece of it out. Social media actually plays a huge role in this right now. There's a big movement in the Haredi world, sort of uniting against these men who are holding their wives captive, as we call it, basically, because they're not divorcing them. And so they're using the tools of social media to shame the man's family, the place of business, whatever it is, to pressure the guy. And it's been working. I'm not always
It's
on
great.
board with it. I mean, there's some
I'm
scenarios that are strange, but most of the time it's good, obviously, for most of it. But yeah, so just an interesting little note that there are modern ways of sort of getting around.
In the 1980s, New York State passed the get law.
Yes.
And you can't get a civil divorce till your get is taken care of.
Right.
Okay, that's one. In Israel, there are other laws.
Right.
You have 45 days after you're divorced to give a get. If you don't give a get, they can put you in prison.
Right.
So there are ways that we are trying as a society to make it more equitable. You know, and if shaming them, I have no problem with that. Shaming them with the prenup, I have to be honest with you. I'm not on top of the situation.
Right.
I know that Chabad probably would not have it in a ketubah yet.
Right.
You know, yet maybe down the line they will find a way to make it compatible with the ketubahs that we have.
Right.
Not yet, but you know, sure.
Okay.
All right.
Well, hopefully everyone is happily married and doesn't have to worry about getting divorced.
You could be happy. Please be happy.
Yes,
Don't worry.
absolutely.
Be happy.
Yes.
I think the next episode to balance this out, we'll probably have to talk about like Lenny Bruce or Joan Rivers or something.
Yes, that's a good idea. Okay. Well,
thank you very much. This has been very enlightening.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.